Welcome to Noha's narrative where everything feels real and something hides deeper. The girl who smiled while stirring the pot. The first thing Nora Callahan noticed was the smell. Not the sharp antiseptic bite of the hospital room, not the hollow emptiness of her apartment where she had spent her last living months curled under weighted blankets, too weak to lift a glass of water without her hands shaking. No, the smell was warm and familiar in the worst possible way. It was cinnamon and dish soap and the faint ghost of burnt toast. It was the smell of the Callahan house on Sunday morning. She sat up slowly. The ceiling above her was powder blue with a hairline crack running from the light fixture toward the window. She had stared at that crack for the first 17 years of her life. She knew its shape better than her own reflection. Her hands were young again. She turned them over in the pale morning light filtering through the curtains, studying the smooth skin, the short unpolished nails, the faint freckle below her left thumb that she had always called her compass point. She pressed her fingers against her sternum and felt her heart beating strong and even like something that had never been broken. Downstairs, a spoon clinked against a pot. That small ordinary sound landed in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. She knew that sound. She knew exactly who was making it and exactly what expression would be sitting on that person's face while they made it. Priscilla Callahan always cooked with a smile. That was the thing no one ever understood. She was cheerful at the stove. She hummed little songs and tied her hair back neatly and asked you 3 times if you were hungry. The smile never wavered, not once. Nora had spent years after her first death, that slow, quick medical death the doctors called idiopathic organ stress, trying to understand how a person could do something like that while smiling. She had never found an answer that satisfied her. She swung her legs off the bed and sat very still for a moment. In her previous life, she had been grateful. That was the word she kept returning to when she reviewed her memories from the outside, the way you review footage from a camera you had been carrying without knowing it was on. She had been endlessly pitiful, grateful to Priscilla for every bowl of soup, every cup of tea, every lovingly prepared plate of food that appeared at her bedroom door. She had called her sister a saint to anyone who would listen. She had cried at Priscilla's kindness. She understood now what that kindness had actually been. She stood up, her legs were steady. She moved to the small mirror above the dresser and looked at herself. 17 years old, round-faced, dark-eyed, with the same thick auburn braid her aunt Beth used to call her a crowning glory. She looked healthy. She looked like someone with a future. Downstairs, Priscilla called up the stairs in her bright musical voice. Nora, honey, breakfast is almost ready. I made your favorite. Nora looked at her own reflection for one long quick moment. Coming, she said. Her voice came out calm, steady, completely ordinary. She had not planned that. She had expected fear or anger or the sick rolling nausea of grief. Instead, there was only a cool, clear certainty. Settling into her bones like winter sunlight. She was back, she was healthy, she knew everything, and Priscilla Callahan had absolutely no idea. When Nora came downstairs, the kitchen was warm and bright. Aunt Bet sat at the corner of the table with her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, working through a crossword puzzle with a chewed pencil. Betty was a small, comfortable woman with silver straight hair and hands that always smelled like lavender lotion. She had lived with them since their mother passed. She was the only genuinely soft thing in that house. She looked up when Nora appeared and her whole face opened up with easy affection. Morning, sweetheart. Sleep all right? Really well, Nora said. and she meant it. Priscilla was at the stove. She was 19, tall and fine-boned, with their mother's cheekbones and a kind of polished composure that made strangers describe her as a poise. She turned when Nora came in and her smile arrived right on cue, warm and wide and completely convincing. I made oatmeal with the brown sugar you like, she said. Sit down, you look tired. Nora pulled out a chair and sat down across from Aunt Beth. Thank you, she said. She picked up her spoon. She ate every bite because it was only oatmeal this morning. She had checked the timeline in her memory. The lentil stew came later. The stew came on the cold Thursday in October when Aunt Betty had an evening church meeting and Priscilla's boyfriend Owen was coming for dinner. The stew came when there would be witness to Nora's decline but no witness to its cause. Nora had time. She stirred her oatmeal slowly and watched Priscilla move around the kitchen, humming their soft little song, and she thought about lentils and timing and the expression she intended to put on that table in October alongside a bowl of perfectly prepared stew. She was going to cook Priscilla's own recipe. She was going to watch her sisters decide whether to eat it, and she was going to do it all with a smile just as warm and convincing as Priscilla's own. The same recipe, a different cook. October arrived the way Nora had known it would, with low grey skies and the smell of wood smoke threading through the neighborhood, and Aunt Betty announcing over morning coffee that she would be at the church fellowship dinner until 9. Priscilla stood at the counter when Betty said it, pouring juice with her back turned, and Nora watched the smile shift in her sister's shoulders. Barely visible, the tiniest release of tension, like a cat settling more comfortably into a crouch. If you are not looking for it, you would never see it. Nora saw it. Owen Marsh arrived at 6:30. He was a broad-shouldered, good-natured young man who worked at a hardware store 2 towns over, and tonight Priscilla hung the moon and stars personally. He came in stomping mud off his boots in the doorway, holding a paper bag with a bottle of sparkling grape juice inside it because Priscilla had told him Nora did not feel well lately and he had wanted to do something nice. How are you doing, Nora? She asked, and he meant it. Owen always meant what he said. That was the genuinely sad thing about him. But today, Nora told him, I actually cooked dinner. Priscilla had turned. It was fast, that turn, quick and controlled, but Nora caught the flash of something behind her eyes before the pleasant expression resembled itself. You cooked, Priscilla said. Lentil stew, Nora said. Your recipe, I found the card in the tin box. She watched Priscilla's face do something very interesting in its half second before the smile returned. It was not guilt exactly. It was more like the expression of a chess player who has just seen an unexpected piece move across the board. That's so sweet, Priscilla said. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, Nora said simply. You are always cooking for me. I wanted. Owen looked between them with the uncomplicated happiness of someone who had no idea there was a board in the room, let alone pieces moving it on. And that sounds amazing. She was only interested in the question. She set the table carefully, 3 white bowls, the good spoons, cloth napkins folded into the neat rectangles. She ladled the stew while Priscilla and Owen sat down, and she set a bowl in front of each of them, and then she settled into her own chair and picked up her spoon. Owen leaned her over his bowl and inhaled the smells. Incredible, Nora. Thank you, she said. She began to eat. She watched Priscilla look at her bowl. The stew was deep reddish brown, fragrant with cumin and bay leaf, steamingly gently. It looked exactly the way it always looked when Priscilla made it. Because Nora had followed the recipe without changing a single word, Priscilla picked up her spoon. She held it over the bowl. She did not dip it in. Actually, Priscilla said in the light, careful voice, I had a big lunch. I'm not that hungry. Owen looked up from his bowl, already halfway through. Seriously, you didn't eat lunch? I thought you said you were skipping it. A brief pause. I had something small later, Priscilla said. You should at least try it, Owen said. It's really good. Priscilla smiled at him, then she looked at her bowl, her spoon over her necklace were white around the handle. Nora ate another quick spoonful and said nothing at all. She could not even lift the spoon. The silence at the table stretched the way silence does when everyone at it is pretending to be comfortable. Owen finished his bowl and reached for the bread without noticing. He was talking about something at work, a story about a delivery that had gone to the wrong address twice, and his voice filled the room with easy uncomplicated warmth. Nora listened and responded and refilled his water glass and behaved in every visible way like a girl having an ordinary dinner. Priscilla's bowl had not been touched. She had moved the spoon twice, lifted it once. Both times she had set it down again with some quick remark about the bread or the weather or something Owen had just said, steering the current of conversation away from the bowl in front of her the way you steer a car around something in the road without looking directly at it. Nora did not comment. She did not look at the bowl pointedly or make Priscilla's refusal the subject of a question. She just ate her own stew slowly and let the silence around her sister's untouched dinner accumulate like water in a low place. Owen noticed eventually. He could not help it. Priscilla, you have not touched yours, he said, nodding at her bowl with a small frown of genuine concern. Are you feeling alright? I told you, she said smoothly. I'm really not hungry. I'll have some later. It will be cold later, he said. I don't mind. Owen looked at Nora. She met his eyes and offered him a calm, mild smile that said nothing and everything. Then the front door opened. Aunt Bet's church meetings almost never ended early. In Nora's previous life, Betty had stayed until past 9 that night. But this time, the fellowship dinner had wrapped up at 7:30 because the guest speaker had a long drive ahead of her. And Betty had come home with a foil-covered plate of leftover cake and her crossword puzzle still unfinished. She came into the kitchen pulling off her coat and stopped when she saw the table. Her eyes moved from Owen's empty bowl to Nora's half-finished one to Priscilla's untouched stew. Something shifted in her face. It was not surprise exactly. It was more like the expression of someone who has been carrying a heavy thing for a long time and has just been given permission to set it down. Betty said quietly, hanging her coat on the hook by the door. Why are not you eating? I'm not hungry, Aunt Bet. It's Nora, Bet said. She moved to the table and set her foil plate down and stood behind her on chair with both hands resting on its back. You are not eating Nora's cooking. The room went very still. Owen looked between all three of them with a slow dawning awareness of person realizing the conversation happening around him has been happening for a long time before he arrived. Priscilla's jaw tightened. That's not what this is. Then it, Betty said, simple, quit, not unkind. Priscilla looked at her bowl. The stew had stopped steaming. It sat there, dark and fragrant, completely harmless, and Priscilla Callahan could not make herself lift the spoon. Nora watched her sister's face move through several expressions too fast to name and then finally settle into something rigid and controlled and cornered. I think I have lost my appetite, Priscilla said at last. One set his water glass down. He looked at Priscilla with an expression Nora recognized as the last stage of a long. He did not say anything. Betty sat down slowly. She folded her hands on the table and looked at Nora with eyes that were very tired and very sorry and full of something that had clearly been waiting years for a door to open. I have known for a while, Betty said softly, speaking only to Nora. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know what to do with that. I suspected. I am sorry I didn't say it sooner. Nora looked at her aunt and felt something loosen in her chest, not anger, not triumph. Something much sweeter and more permanent than either of those things. It's all right, Aunt Bet, she said, and she meant that. She pushed her chair back and carried her bowl to the sink and stood at the window for a moment, looking out at the dark October yard. The neighbor's porch light was on. Somewhere down the block, a dog was barking at something invisible. She left the solidity of the floor under her feet. She felt her own steady breathing. She felt the clean, unbreakable fact of being alive and now and no longer alone in what she understood. Behind her, she heard the sound of Priscilla's chairs scraping back from the table. She heard footsteps on the stairs. She heard a door close. She did not turn around. She stood at the window and let the quiet settle over her like something art, something that fit the shape of her exactly. And she thought about the long, careful months ahead and everything she now had the chance to do differently. She had come back for this, not for revenge, not for the satisfaction of watching Priscilla's flinch at her own recipe. She had come back to stop being grateful for things that were hurting her. She had come back to know the difference, and standing at that window in her childhood kitchen with the stew cooling on the stove and Aunt Bet sitting behind her and the night pressing soft and wide against the glass, Nora Callahan finally did. Thank you so much.